Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday, the 16th of July, and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 36, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
Well, busy week again, and we've got a few shout-outs today, haven't we, as well, Curtis?
We have indeed, yes. So for the second half of the show this week, we'll actually be catching up with Menable's Stephen Whitten. And Stephen's going to give us an update on mental health and well-being awareness, and also best practices in the car retailing sector, and also how you can get involved.
Yeah, it was good chatting to Steve. I know, obviously, he kindly sends us on a fortnightly basis a little snippet from Enable Moments and records it and sends it to us. But actually, it was great to chat with him and just have that, natter about what's happening in his world and what he's been up to, etc. So do stay tuned for that, because I think you'll find that some of the things that Steve does talk about and some of the work that they're on with as part of that Menable will be of interest to many of you today.
Yeah, definitely. And a shout out for you, Phil, because I understand autofocus has landed.
Yeah, we've just done the sixth issue. So Autofocus is our quarterly report that looks at the sort of the current market as it is today. So that's just been released this week. You will start to see some press releases on the back of it, but in there you'll find revised forecasts for the new and used market for the UK for 2022. Content again from Grant Thornton looking at the impact of the economic market, inflation, interest rates, etc. Steve Young, a friend of the podcast, is in there. And our friend Ian Richardson from 360 Media has shared some insight around EVs and what research they've been on with as part of that sustainability index at 360 Media as well. So, yeah, lots for you to get your head into there and look at.
Yeah, definitely. And curiously enough, pretty much all the topics you just mentioned there will be covered in today's show in one way or another.
It will. And we mustn't forget, if you do want to get in touch, as many are doing, or come on the show and or send us a press release, then please do email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com, or you can join the Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn group or Facebook groups, or you can follow us on Twitter. Alternatively, just drop either Curtis or myself a note through any of our social channels, and we'll gladly have a chat and see what we can do to get you involved with the podcast.
Okay, so headlines this week are from AM Online, Car Dealer, and Motor Trade News. And they are: used car supply may never return to previous levels, EVs to make up almost a third of used car sales by 2030. The next one is probably the headline of the week in terms of the way it's written. Nissan accused of cloak and dagger tactics to axe over 20 car dealerships, and we'll end with a couple of acquisitions.
Yeah, so as you say there, we've not been over to Motor Trade News for a while, but they've published a story on behalf of the VRA, the Vehicle Remarketing Association, on the back of the recent AGM and members meeting, which I had the pleasure of chairing and hosting. And the headline is "Used car supply may never return to previous levels." So this is trying to look at the impact of the shortage of new vehicles, what that's happening in the used car market, but more importantly, what that means for the remarketing sector and the members of the remarketing association.
Yeah, and it must have been a fascinating meeting, Phil, because this is a topic that's pretty much centre stage at the moment. It's the supply and demand and how it's looking at the moment. But I guess more importantly, how it's going to look in the near to long term. So what sort of feedback were you getting from some of your members on this?
Yeah, it's quite interesting really, because when you start to talk about the lost production, and I don't know, many of the listeners may have seen it, that there was a media release that was run by Fleet Europe and Fleet Global, and they called it the lost 31 million. And that was referring to the fact that over the 2-year period of 2020 and 2021, we've lost 31 million vehicles produced over that same equivalent 2 year period pre-pandemic. Now, reality is, even this year for 2022, IHS Market are forecasting 80.3 million for the year, which will then be another 14, 15, 16 million short of a normal pre-pandemic year. So that'll take you up to sort of 45 million vehicles that have not been produced over that 3 year period. So, and reality is, we know, because you and I speak on a regular, weekly basis on this, because there's always something in the headlines around the new vehicle supply market and what that's doing. But this is more about what the impact will be for the coming years, because
Yeah.
that's used vehicles that
Yes.
will never enter the marketplace,
Yeah.
and how we sort of manage that going forward. So it's quite interesting because, I say, I think the Fleet Europe release, I think on LinkedIn, it's got about 12.5, 13,000 impressions. And it's kind of, I think it's brought to light what that means, what it looks like going forward, and what people need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and you do make an interesting point in this piece about for decades how car manufacturing has been a volume business, but we've seen for quite a long time now how these supply issues are reducing the number of cars registered, and also interestingly the effect that it had over the course of last year, because there were fewer new cars, there were fewer used cars, but a lot of dealers were doing very well because their margins were so much better, so much stronger. So it's turning into a sort of new reality, and it'd be interesting to see how this one pans out.
Yeah, and it's. I think somebody's commented on this story this morning that, interestingly, we'll talk about it shortly. Just need fewer dealerships. Survivors then take a bigger market area to match potential and holding costs. So, quite interestingly, is how that, at the same time, fewer vehicles entering the market, but actually we've got consolidation in the market, which
Yeah.
means a, a similar pot to go after by fewer dealerships. But I'm sure we'll get
It,
onto that one shortly.
Yeah, it is the grim reality. You're totally right, and we will return to that theme. So the next story is from Car Dealer, and the headline is EVs to make up almost a third of used car sales by 2030, new research finds. So this research was actually done by LV, the insurance group, and it's based on forecasting that they've done from data supplied by the DFT and DVLA on registrations. So the analysis has actually found that 31% of cars on the used car market will be BEVs at the start of the next decade. So last year, BEVs made up just 1.3% of the total number of cars on the road. So that was just shy of 400,000 units. And this story illustrates how that number will grow. So the projections, the forecast from LV suggests that that number is expected to rise to over 1 million by the end of 2023, so next year. But it'll still only equate to just over 3% of all cars. So it's still a small proportion, but then doubling in 2025 and then trebling to 6.4 million cars by 2030. So it shows where that sort of critical mass is starting to kick in.
Yeah, again, great insight, and as you say, coming from a slightly different area of the market from that sort of insurance sector, because I think on our Robert Forrester interview, we touched on the point about insurance companies just writing off
Yes.
EVs
Yeah.
at 0 years because of the cost of the battery, and you can see where possibly this kind of research has emerged, where somebody like LV have probably been trying to think what their future risk is, and they need to be considering, because they come in as used cars, and the industry needs to transition and get their head around how this will work. And as a volume player, as a used volume player, it will start to increase, won't it, in terms of that
Yeah.
share?
Yeah, and interesting. In the story, it mentions the zero emissions mandate, which I'm not sure if we've actually mentioned it on the podcast, but that's coming into play in 2024, and that will actually start to mandate the proportion of EVs that OEMs sell compared with ICE vehicles,
Mm.
and again, it will accelerate the number of new EVs coming into the market. So, another factor at play there.
Yeah, it is, and that's the point because I think, again, I think we've talked about it on other stories, but people have this 2030 as the point in time, whereas reality is it is, as mentioned here, 2025 is probably that inflection point when this will all start to change because of that emission regulation coming in and other things that, we will start to see a significant acceleration of electric vehicles from 2024, 2025 going forward. So, yeah, there's a lot going on over the next few years.
So, next headline is from AM Online, and it's Nissan accused of cloak and dagger tactics to axe over 20 car dealerships. So, yes, this.
It's a good headline.
Where do we start with this one? This is based on information that AM have obtained from a meeting. I don't know if it was an online meeting, but it was Nissan launched its ideal network plan last week, and it started to inform the network as to what this new plan would include. And it turns out that, according to the AM report, that a number of high-performing retailers will be terminated, and there's been no formal announcement of that, no consultation or public announcement prior to inquiries that were made by AM. So, hence the use of cloak and dagger in the headline, because it looks as though the OEM in question here pretty much wanted to keep this under wraps, with AM also saying that those that are part of the coal were not told not to discuss the plan.
Yeah, and as you say there, I mean the use of words becomes even better because they talk about aggrieved business leaders claim they have been told that the axing of certain retailers is in no way related to their performance, but the result of a geographically determined plan based on pins on a map that will prioritize group representation over smaller operators. So, again, things are now starting to play out, and as you say, it's kind of, this has not been, I don't think it's been confirmed or denied by Nissan at this stage, has it? I don't think there's anything they're saying on this, but yeah, I think they're obviously a bit of unhappy network, should we say? There.
Yeah, it looks though AM did contact Nissan, but Nissan said the changes to consumer needs will require constant evolution, adding that in order to meet these challenges, increased investments are needed from retail partners in the key areas of digitization, facilities and infrastructure. So no meat on the bones there, but looking at the numbers, so I'm pretty sure as recently as last year, Nissan had around 200 dealers. But if this plan goes, according to the way that it's set out in the story, the network will go from around 160 sites at the moment to 140, which is around 16% drop in representation.
Yeah,
And these sites will have 2-year termination notices, but that's pretty much it.
yeah, and I think it's not a shock in many ways. I think we know we see a lot now coming out of the OEMs around that consolidation. We were just talking about earlier in terms of that smaller market. We know that OEMs have been trying to focus on low volumes and higher profitability as a result of this transition and the pandemic and production constraints. So the market is changing, and they're not the only OEM that has consolidated their network and utilizing that digital reach that they'll have within that dealer network. It's just a case of who are the preferred partners and who they will be aligning with. But there's no indication of agency in this yet. So, and they haven't alluded to anything on transitioning to agency. So this is the first stage of that consolidation, I think, at the minute.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that, Phil, because Nissan is one of the few manufacturers who hasn't actually shown its hand on agency, has it?
Yeah, no, there's about 60% that have, and obviously 40% that have no indications publicly about the switch to agency. That includes people like General Motors, GM, Suzuki, Subaru, Mazda, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. We've got an element of the new entrances that are entering the UK market that will be potentially, they will remain online, and that's people like Tesla, Polestar, Rivian, and Lucid, to name a few. But yeah, Nissan at the minute are one of the ones that have not publicly said anything about agency and any intention around agency transition. So they are the part of that 40% that haven't alluded to that yet.
We'll close this part of the show with two acquisitions. The first one reported in AM Online. Bachelor's Motor Group acquires Otley, Renault and Dacia dealerships. So this is Ripon-based Bachelor's Motor Group has completed the acquisition of Kineholm of Otley's, so that's a Renault and Dacia dealership, to expand its footprint into West Yorkshire. And it's an interesting little story,
Mm.
this, because we spoke about this before we started recording, and there is definitely a trend towards expanding or exiting, isn't there, amongst these smaller groups?
Yeah, well, we always saw that the risk of consolidation was that middle band, that franchise owner operated businesses that you had your large groups that were buying, they were scaling, and they were becoming significant partners to many of the OEMs. You have your smaller independent non-franchise operators going to be a little bit more agile and react differently to the marketplace. But that one in the middle where you've still got to invest in um, the branding and invest in your premises, etc., etc. Those are the ones that, in the main, were struggling a little bit. And I think you're right there, Curtis. We did chat before the show around this. Interesting. You start to see a little bit more of those ones that are expanding a little bit by buying other privately owned businesses and taking on, similar or the same brands that they operate under, and really trying to sort of take over, expanding their territories, and the owner drivers that aren't interested in scaling up and just looking to get out, and are quite happy to do so and move that on to somebody with similar views, I suspect, to themselves. So yeah, we see it's starting to see a little bit more of that at the minute, but it's great. I think generally, I think there's opportunities there and some growth, and it's great to see some of these smaller, one, two, three site operators just expand a little bit more, getting a bit of advantage from that scale as we move forward.
Yeah, and it's a good fit for Bachelor's Motor Group because they presently operate two Suzuki sites. They've got two specialist Mitsubishi sites and a specialist Mini site. So adding Renault and Dacia, is a really, really good fit there.
Yeah, interesting. Two of those that you mentioned there, two of the ones that have got no intention to shift to. Well, you got Mitsubishi and Suzuki there that haven't publicly announced shift to agency, whilst the BMW Mini, there are indications there, and there is obviously indications from the Renault one as well. So it's going to be quite interesting this now.
And the next acquisition is a sort of maybe tentative acquisition because it's been reported by AM Online that Stephen Eagle lines up Inchcape Oxford Toyota dealership acquisition. So it hasn't been confirmed, but I'm guessing that AM have got it from very good sources.
Yeah, I think we spoke about Stephen Eagle and their sort of expansion with Toyota, and their relationship with Toyota, and we've always talked about Inchcape and some of the strategy that they're doing at the minute in terms of exiting certain brands and focus on different areas of their business. So you can kind of see this, can't you? You can see
Yeah.
why it would be happening, but as you say, it's not confirmed yet. But it would make a lot of sense for Inchcape maybe to move further away from Toyota and Stephen to get a little bit more representation with a business that he's done very well with over the years, hasn't he? That's not
Yeah,
he's done really well.
yeah, definitely. If the acquisition does go through, then it'll take his representation up to 23 locations, and that is a soulless Toyota group, so that is pretty formidable.
Yeah, because we did talk, I think, around his acquisitions, didn't he? From, was it Marshalls, that he'd bought some businesses that they'd taken on recently. I think we talked about.
We did, yeah, certainly over the last couple of months. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of activity there at the Stephen Eagle Group.
but that's it for the headlines, isn't it? I mean, there's lots going on, and
Yeah,
as
yeah,
you say, we
yeah.
talked about everything from acquisition to cloak and dagger, agency, EV. there, all in the first sort of 15-20 minutes of today's show.
Yes, lots going on. You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now we're delighted to welcome our well-being guru and regular Menable Moments contributor, Stephen Whitten, into the virtual Motor Trade Radio studio for one of our occasional live chats. So welcome back to the podcast, Steve.
Oh, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to come back, and especially as you keep referring to me as a guru. So I'm not sure
Yes.
So I am currently, as we speak, levitating around my apartment in a white linen suit.
That's a view and a half that we've now got.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, it's great to have you back on with us, Steve. I mean, normally it's a record that you supply, but we thought this would be a good opportunity to sort of update the listeners on the mental well-being service Menable offers across the car retailing sector. But, to start with, we thought it would be interesting for you to share some of your feedback on what you've, your regular Menable moments on the podcast, because you've been doing them for some time now, and I think you quite enjoy doing them by the sounds of it, depending on where you are and what's in the background.
Yeah, I do enjoy doing them, and I mean, if you didn't know me better, you'd think I like the sound of my own voice, wouldn't you? But they are, yeah, no. In all honesty, I've had a lifetime in the industry, and I know what it can be like, and whether you're at the top or wherever you are, it can be a lonely existence at times, and men in particular don't talk about mental health. So if we've got the opportunity to start conversations, put information out there, then through Menable Moments is a great platform. And, as always, I'm very grateful for you guys to give us the opportunity to do that. But most recently, and I've given a few people some shout outs lately as well, because obviously I talk to a lot of people, and every so often I'm now getting people saying, oh, I heard your Menable Moments last week, and that the timing of that was perfect because that helped me with this situation. And probably the most notable one, which I think we spoke about before, was somebody a week or two ago said that they know someone who was running a car dealership in the country and is going through a particularly tough time, and had made the comment that the Menable Moments is a sort of 4 or 5 minutes of kind of real helpful light relief for them. And I must admit, I did get a bit of a lump in my throat, because I thought, oh my God, wow, that's exactly why we're doing it. To just know that people don't have to chip in, just know that we're there.
Yeah, and I think, really, as you say, it's without bringing the tone down a little bit, it's just over a year since we lost our friend James Davis, or as many would know, JD. And I know, definitely Curtis and I, and you would have come across him in the social space more than everything else, and larger life. And say, people listening to this podcast today will remember that it is a year on this week, because it was obviously the World Cup. So yeah, it's like you say, it's a poignant time to be thinking about others and that world of well-being, and getting people to talk about it more than they do.
Yeah, definitely. And it's moments like that that remind us that, the phrase there, but for the grace of God go I, and anyone who's having any problems or challenges could very, very easily find themselves in a position where, they get to a real low, and without talking about it and without opening up and without having people that understand and empathize and listen, it can feel very lonely. And I've been there myself, and I know what it's like to feel that that's a desperate situation and is your only way out. So if we can do what we can to prevent that, then that's what we're about, really.
Yeah, definitely. And Steve, turning to your work at Menable, can you remind listeners about the Menable Me app, which you came onto the show some months ago to talk about it when it was launched? But maybe if you could tell us how that community is developing, and also how listeners can actually join it.
Yeah, well, it's developing really well. I mean, we've got well over 100 members now. One day I'll be saying to you, we've got membership in the thousands, because the people that are on there, we've got a lot of people that in the nicest possible way, I would say they lurk. They're sort of in the background and they're reading and seeing what's going on. And we've got a good number of people who interact and engage. And what's happening now is people are putting posts on, and then other people are commenting. And we're even hearing stories of people who are connecting privately and then supporting each other through phone calls and emails privately outside of the app. And that's exactly, again, why we started it. It sits between a Facebook group and a WhatsApp group, so there's no need for any personal information. You don't link it to your Facebook profile. There's no pictures of you hanging out of a taxi on a Friday night or anything like, unless you want to, of course. And it's not a WhatsApp group, so you're not going to get millions of pings every time someone makes a comment. And I think people quite like that. And of course, the theme all the way through it is mental health and well-being. There's some lighter stuff in there as well, and it's all absolutely bespoke to our industry, with various topics, various groups, and I couldn't be more delighted with the way it's going, if I'm honest.
And I guess, Steve, what's also interesting is that it cuts across job titles as well, doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, we've got the different groups in there for different parts of the business. So we've got, tread talk for people who work in the tires side of things, and parts talk, body talk, and, all of that. But you're right, we've got specific areas as well for anyone in management or in sales, in service. And I know, Phil, you're on it, aren't you, as well?
I am, yeah. It's quite, it's enjoyable. It's not, I think, there are, like you say, there's the ones that are very open, share videos, share how they're feeling, and there's, like you say, there's the others that are just in the background there, and it probably, they sit there in the background, but it'll brighten up their day in certain points, or it'll bring a point where they read how somebody's open and talking, and make them feel a little bit better about themselves. So hopefully it does a bit for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And this, back to your question, Curtis, about going across job roles. I mean, there you can see, obviously I'm on it, Phil's on it. We've got, Rachel, who's a paint sprayer. We've got Sophie Bailey, who runs a tyre business. We've got Chris Wiseman, who's an MD of a dealer group. The thing is open to anyone and everyone in the industry.
And recently, you introduced some well-being check-ins. So, do you want to tell us a little bit what these are and what response you've had from employers on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's still very much in a kind of pilot stage, early sort of stage. But one of our members, in discussions with us, felt that they needed to offer up something to their teams that enabled them to have a check-in. They didn't need counselling, they didn't need therapy. They just wanted to offer something up that said, here's an opportunity for you to have a 35, 40-minute conversation with a coach, stroke counsellor, and just talk about stuff that's going on for you. And they've gone down a storm, if I'm honest, and we've started to see, and clearly we need to have some measures in there, and we've seen a 28% reduction in stress levels just on the call alone. And then off the back of it, we've been able to refer several people onto other services, and some of that has been through their HR department. Some of that's been directly. Some of that is that they want more conversations with us. But the one thing, overriding thing with everyone is that these are everyday people that are working in our business, not our business, their business, our industry. But they don't feel they need counselling. They're not at the stage where they're in crisis, but they just need to have a conversation with someone, get stuff off their chest. And from an employer point of view, it's gone down the storm that the employees are now going, wow, my boss and my company are taking an interest in what's going on for me outside of work. This is a first.
Because this was kind of something, and not necessarily to this kind of extent in terms of measures and referrals and things like that. But if we think of the early days of the lockdowns and many businesses that had that kind of culture within the business, and I talk from my own experience with our company, Cox Automotive, but it was about having those check-ins, particularly for those ones that suddenly were working from a home environment rather than a team office environment, that it it needed to sort of happen. It was just a check in, making sure people were okay, everything all right.
Yeah.
Do you need to talk? It's that kind of thing. So it seems like it's a bit of a evolution from that, and a proven concept that people do need just to check in and chat and talk.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I said it was a bit of a pilot. I mean, I think to be honest, we've gone beyond that now because we're now having conversations with other members to look at doing something similar for them. And I think it's now, yeah, it's become something that they want to sort of formalize as a regular thing. And of course, there's been a bit of a business is going back to normal to some extent. And as you say, during the pandemic, we were all sort of in a similar boat, weren't we? And in panic mode. And now the business is trying its hardest to go back to what we knew before. We really are now loving working with our members and saying, look, there's just this little thing that you can use to check in. A lot of their employees are on Menable Me as well, so it's kind of a double-edged sword in that respect, that they feel like they're getting support and help.
And Steve, an important part of what you and Menable does is promoting the importance of mental well-being to managers,
Mm.
especially those in a position to actually cascade to their immediate reports and across the business. So, can you tell us how this is actually feeding into your programs, and also how your background in dealer training is shaping that particular direction?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always felt from the word go that there's a mental health angle to everything, absolutely everything. You know, we've always talked about we've all got physical health and everyone's got mental health, and quite often, if I was talking about this with Steve Nash at the IMI last week, and he came up with a great phrase that said, you know, if you've got mentally defective employees, that's a productivity issue. And what we are doing is looking at, well, how do we help managers to identify that, to work with that, and to have the empathy and the emotional intelligence to be able to help their team get into a good place. And one of our starting phrases is always that positive employees equal positive business outcomes, which equals great customer outcomes. Not necessarily in that order, but that's that's always been our thing. And when people feel good about themselves, they perform well. So, and a lot of managers, and myself included, when I was in that position, haven't had the benefit of training in this direction. And that's what I call on from my previous experience, because, I can remember being part of that whole training movement of training on process and training on procedure, training on standards, training on, what boxes need to be ticked. And, oh, by the way, don't forget you're managing people as well. So we need to do an afternoon on that. Whereas now we're coming at it and going, no, actually, the people are the pinnacle of what you're doing. Let's help you with that bit. And a lot of those other things will take care of themselves. So it all kind of really kind of weaves together quite nicely.
And Steve, do you feel as though attitudes amongst management are actually changing, and that maybe you're pushing against an open door more so than maybe in the past?
I think so, definitely. Yeah, I mean we're doing some work around management competencies, and I've always been one to come forward and say in the past, and again this is my experience, we've tended to promote for confidence, not competence. And as a result, a lot of managers have managed in the way that they were managed previously, without thinking, well, does that really work? Is that still fit for purpose? And so I think, yeah, it's now all starting to kind of make sense. The jigsaw's coming together, if that makes sense as well. And I can see that there is a nice little direction building for where we're going now with Menable. And we do have, in the nicest possible way, a little bit of a bottleneck, and it's around middle management that need the help and support. And I've mentioned it a few times on Menable Moments. That's not to be critical; it's an observation, and to just say, look, there is, it is noted and it is being worked on.
And with that in mind, I mean, you actively, we talked about those check-ins and that from an employer perspective, but you've been looking at
Mm.
pilots for a business wellbeing accreditation program.
Hmm.
Can you share what you think that will look like? And you probably maybe alluded to some of it, but and how listeners can get involved with that accreditation program.
Yeah, well, our vision for that is a sort of trust pilot type of approach, where you get a certain number of stars. In this case, there won't be stars; there'll be M's, obviously, um, for depending on your approach to mental health and well-being in your business. I've mentioned before that ISO 45003 is the legal requirement, and a lot of businesses are not even aware that exists. Um, so what we want to do is to say to businesses out there, look, come and work with us, and we'll take an assessment and a view of what's going on in your business from a wide range of angles, so that it's as objective as possible, and help you put an action plan in place so that you're not just ticking a box and going, yeah, we do great stuff around mental health, but you're actually actively engaged in it as a leader, and looking for those great outcomes that we're starting to see in other businesses that do some good, really, really good stuff.
And finally, Steve, I guess it's the big question that we've we've kept to last. With so much change and uncertainty in the sector, and yeah, we report on this every week on the podcast with pressure on new sales, used sales, the unknowns around agency, and also this consolidation across the sector, which seems to be picking up some momentum once again. What are you actually hearing from employers and employees that you're talking to about how these changes and other changes and uncertainty is actually affecting their mental health in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, well, I think what I'm definitely hearing is that, from the leaders, they are working their rear ends off to, properly navigate the way forward in a world of uncertainty and instability, and that, of course, will be having an effect on them as well. And one of our key things is we always ask leaders in businesses, who have you got in your business that asks you how you are, as a bit of a benchmark of what's going on. But of course, that change gets, some of that gets heard about and fed down through the lines. And of course, at the other end, what we're hearing a lot is that people on the lower salaries are starting to look actively at moving around other businesses because they might get 50p or £1 an hour extra somewhere else. And we're starting to hear that a lot. So the whole gaining, training, and retaining good people is probably one of the core elements of the change and uncertainty that we're seeing. And some of that will be driven by the mental health of people. And feed that back into our well-being check-ins. We look at those from 5 perspectives, and they are around mental health, physical health, financial health, environmental health, and social health. And any one of those 5 pillars, if you like, can be affected by what's going on around you and the uncertainty and the stuff that you're not sure of what's going on, and particularly the financial health. If you're worried about paying your bills and your favourite marmalade's gone up 25 pence in Aldi, of all places. I mean, if you've got a small family and you're on a low income, that 25 pence times 20 items, stacks up, and that means a lot to people. So again, what we're aiming to do is to create this psychological safety so that people can have those conversations openly with their bosses, rather than just go, do you know what, I can't afford to work here anymore, I'm off for another £1 an hour or 5 grand a year or whatever.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on in that market at the minute in terms of that cost, because you just don't realise that impact that's having an effect all the way down the line. Whether that's the fuel prices at the pumps, that somebody's
Yep.
got to get to work to
Mm-hmm.
buy the shopping for that week, and
Yep.
suddenly it's costing them 50% more on their fuel bill each week just to put food on the table, which inevitably costs them more money to buy as well. So it has this knock-on effect all the way through.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think financial well-being is probably key at the minute for many people across the
Well,
sector.
Exactly, and there's another sort of element to this as well, which is, we hear a lot about the Great Resignation, and I often think of that in some cases that's actually the Great Realization. It's people now going, well, do I need to do those kind of hours to earn that sort of money, or could I go and do something else? And people are starting to have ask those questions of themselves. Which is having an impact on our industry as well. And of course, if you're a leader, you're looking at that as well as, I've got to try and get a return on investment here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just before we finish with saying our thanks, that you alluded recently you got a OEM manufacturer potentially involved. Is there anything you can share today with that, or is it still under discussions at the minute?
It's under discussion, but the coveted first OEM to join Menable Place is still available. So we
not that I was following your social feed and trying to put two and two together there, Mr. Whitton. But
are you going to come and talk to me about my tattoo as well? Or not?
No, I don't know.
No, we're not going there, Steve.
That was dedicated to you, Phil. No, we are in conversations all the time with OEMs, dealer groups, but of course, obviously, day to day, this is affecting the people. The stuff that we do affects the people on the ground.
Yeah.
So our conversations with OEMs are exactly that. Let's come and have a chat. Oh yeah, we think we can fit you in 3 months' time, and then then it's takes forever to get in front of the right people, as anyone in any consultancy role
Yes.
within our industry will understand.
Yeah.
So. None of the OEMs are beating a path to our door just yet, but that could be for a number of reasons. But yeah, so the first one to join up is still the going to get that coveted title at some point.
Okay.
Well, Steve, you'll be pleased to know that a number of OEMs do actually listen on a regular basis to the podcast. So they've heard it straight from the horse's mouth there. They just need to get in touch with you, don't they?
And on that note, we want to thank you for coming on the show. And I mean, obviously, it's great to have you on and chatting through rather than just the 5-6 minute recording, but which are, as I said right at the start of this, are very, very positively received, and that firsthand just by the feedback and the impact that the Menable moments have had on listeners and made them stop and think about things. So it's great to have you on, and we always say obviously about that you are quite easily available to find on the social channels, particularly on LinkedIn. But just for those that have missed you and that they do want to get involved with anything around mental health and well-being, even that's from a serious perspective, or whether it's just to brighten the day up, where can they find you and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, funnily enough, as you said, you might find me on LinkedIn. So it's Stephen J. That's with a PH. Stephen J. Whitton. You can find me on there. I've got the email. The best email is action@menable.org. Those are or they can contact us through you, of course, if you've got your contact details up, or through the website menable.org.
And can they get the app from there as well? The Menable Me, where's the best place for that?
The best place for that is there's a separate URL for that, which is menable-me.com. So if they go to that, and then they can pick the plan, because we've still got the offer that we put out for Motor Trade Radio podcast listeners. So we've kept that running. So because we've got a few people who've joined up from that. So if they want to join us from there, they can.
And Steve, just remind the listeners what the offer is.
It was for half the retail price, so it normally goes out at $2.99 per person per month, but we halved that for Motor Trade Radio podcast listeners.
Yeah,
and we've been so busy, I haven't taken the plan off, so it's still there.
Oh right, well there you go.
Extended, it's extended.
Yes.
It's especially extended just for you. Well, yeah, because good mental health provision sells cars and sells hours. That's all I would say.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, as I said earlier, it's a pleasure as always, and we can chat and we can have a laugh, and I'm sure we could extend this into a more humorous discussion if we wanted to, but we won't do it at this point. We'll leave that to your men-able moments and
always another
await
time, Phil.
on a what we're going to listen to each fortnight from you, Steve. But it's
Yeah.
an absolute pleasure, as always,
Yeah.
to have you on.
And thank you. And once again, thanks for all your support and for everyone who gets stuck in. We really, really do appreciate it. So thank you.
You're welcome. Many thanks, Steve.
Well, Steve was on great form there as always, and to be fair, he's doing a lot of stuff into it, particularly sort of those leadership classes and helping the sector in terms of thinking differently about mental health and how it works within the business.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of initiatives going around at the moment at Men-able. So there's the wellbeing check-ins, the business wellbeing accreditation, and the Men-able Me app. So lots going on. And interesting what he was saying about OEM support or lack of it. So if you are listening and you're an OEM, get in touch with Stephen Whitten.
According to the headlines we've just talked about, maybe they're busy doing other things.
Well, there is that. There is that. Yeah,
they are busy, and I'm sure that Stephen's obviously speaking to many of the OEMs, and I think I think he does himself a little bit in terms of what he's achieved in the time and how he's moved this forward. As you say there, Curtis, he's on with a lot of things, and the fact that he's now getting mentions and he's getting shout outs for where what he's doing has helped people, which is key with this. So he is starting to see results from this. So keep it up, Stephen. And as we said to Stephen, if you do want to get in touch with Stephen, then you can get in touch with him direct at Stephen with a PH .Whitton, that's WHITTON at menable.org. Or, as always, you'll find him on LinkedIn very easily. He's very prolific on LinkedIn.
almost as prolific as you, Phil.
Yes. No, but that's it. I mean, what a show. So thanks for joining us today, and I hope you found some of these stories interesting. And as always with this, do head over to the media pieces that we were sort of referencing there, because it's always a busy day within our industry, isn't it, Curtis?
It is, yeah, never a dull moment. But
Yes.
that's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.